The owner of Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies. Bob is an herbalist, an acupuncturist, and a teacher here in St. Petersburg. He's the director of the Professional Herbalist Training Program. It's a 2-year clinical herbal program that he teaches, and is also on the board of directors of the Florida State Oriental Medicine Association. He lectures regularly around at colleges and other organizations, and has lectured at the Florida Herbal Conference, the American Herbalist Guild Conference, and other places. Has an active practice here in Florida with herbal therapies and acupuncture, and as well is very involved in the community, providing acupuncture through the free community acupuncture for seniors, Homeless Connect. He's a member of Acupuncturists Without Borders. I'd like to hear some more about that. He's a member of many organizations with alternative medicine and nature conservation. Really quite a list of accomplishments, Bob.
Yeah. I try to keep busy.
I think you probably do keep busy. And Bob has an interesting history too. He's worked as a counselor for teenagers, been a treasure hunter, commercial diver and fisherman, and also infantryman in the Iraq War, Desert Storm.
Desert Storm.
Yeah. So you have really lived some life. And additionally, you're a traveler and a travel writer too.
Yeah, I'm a travel writer. Actually, about 15, actually, it was almost 20 years ago, I created a website, smallshipcruises.com. And recently, it was a full-time profession for a little while, and turned it over to my mom. She passed away. My brother's been running it. We actually just sold the website just a few weeks ago. But I still get to do a couple of travel writing gigs for the organization that purchased it. So exciting to keep my finger in that. So
sure,
a lot of fun, and I'm able to tie that into the herbal realm as well, and be able to visit places like the Amazon in Peru and visit with indigenous people and so forth. So
fascinating.
Keep it all together in a simple little package still.
Sure. And being able to tie all that in with herbs. I'm interested, Bob. I'm always interested in this idea of being called by life. So when did you first sort of get interested in herbalism, and how did that happen? What's the story behind that?
It's actually funny. It's you mentioned things like a calling and divine intervention and inspiration, and I literally was just a kid born in Chicago, grew up in Manhattan, New York City proper, and Mom sent me away to a summer camp in Maine. I think I was about 8 or 10 years old. It's hard to say.
A magic age.
Yeah, and hated it. Absolutely hated it. In the woods, just in a strange place. And the camp nurse took us on a nature walk. And along the way, we're walking along. She's like, "You see that? That's a wild blueberry. You can eat it." Who doesn't like blueberry? There's a wild strawberry. You can eat that. And I was really fascinated with this idea. And as we walked along, there was things like, here's a flower, you can eat that. And here's a leaf, and they tasted good. And I was a geek then, I'm a geek now. And
we're members of the club.
Yeah, right. I'm a proud card-carrying member. And I got back, and some of the listeners may remember, Yule Gibbons and Stalking the Wild Asparagus. I was a bit precocious in my reading, so I picked up that book when I got home and started going through it. And going to Central Park and Collar Shirts Park and some of the other parks that were near me, I started to identify the edible plants, and started with that process of, this is food that grows at my feet. And as time went on, I started to recognize that it actually had a role not only as food, but as in medicine. And 1,000 different permutations of that, studying both nutraceuticals, health in general, alternative health, herbal medicine. It all came to an interesting end, and I could go on for hours with stories, but going out to Desert Storm, I actually looked at the medicinal plants that would be growing there in the desert, and was able to identify and eat some of them while I was out there.
Wow.
But when I got back, I was part of that Desert Storm syndrome, whatever that was. and was unable to work for a year and tried to use herbal medicine without success for my own wellness at the time, because it was very much a lay knowledge. It was what I'd read in books and what I'd picked up from small little smatterings of stuff.
So you were treating yourself for the Desert Storm syndrome. Can you talk just a little bit about what that is? And
it's manifests differently for everyone.
Yeah.
And for me, it was more associated with kind of a chronic fatigue, a lot of digestive issues.
So this wasn't PTSD. This was due to the chemical exposure, or
most likely
whatever, the burning of particular kinds of trash or something. They said that's part of.
We had lots of opportunities to get messed up by a variety of unique chemicals and experiences. And I would say PTSD is a part of anybody. I only half jokingly say, if you're a typewriter repairman and you were in a war zone, you have PTSD. It's a question of the severity of it. So throw in a stressor on top of miscellaneous chemical exposures. Something gets a little out of whack sometimes. So skin rashes and GI stuff was the primary, along with fatigue.
And that could be a sort of a symptom of PTSD too.
Yes, without a doubt.
Because of those
that gut-brain connection without a doubt.
Up there, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's funny, at the time, I didn't really comprehend those ideas. Now, fast forward, 20 years later, it's like the big obvious in both Western mental health issues, but also in Chinese medicine. We see that direct connection between the two.
And this has been a path that has started from that, as that boy in the woods.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah. What a magic moment that must have been, just the idea of understanding that food comes from the earth and not from the supermarket shelves. And
it was a revelation.
And how many kids these days, I'm going to bring my glasses down and rumble. How many kids in modern world have the opportunity, in our modern world, have the opportunity to make those kinds of connections?
And it's, I wouldn't even say it's a lost art. It is a knowledge that I do believe was lost here in the U.S. And it's getting a little bit of a resurgence, through everything from the permaculture and that idea of urban gardens, that people are starting to recognize the importance of fresh food. And as the debate of things like GMO is coming up, people are starting to notice that there's other ways of looking and dealing with things.
And they're more interested in what they're taking into their body and how their bodies work.
Yeah.
And how essential it is to pay attention to the consumption of what's feeding your body.
Without a doubt. And I'm an avid gardener. I have been since, back when I was that age. But one of the things that I've kind of brought it all together is the idea that we don't need to grow our European tomatoes here in Florida.
Okay.
They don't do so great.
Right.
And yet there were indigenous people here for tens of thousands of years who lived off of the vegetables and the herbs and the medicine that was surrounding them and that nature provided for them. And that knowledge has been lost. When we pick up edible foraging books, they're all about the Northeast. They're all about Europe. They're Southeast, well, they mean North Carolina. And the plants that grow here it's truly a unique biome that we live in here in Florida. So what I've the last 10, 15 years, I've really focused on finding those plants that are food and medicine that are already here. I don't have to plant things like Spanish needles. It's a weed. It's in your yard. I promise. I can walk out on the sidewalk right now and find a half a dozen plants that we can eat.
Okay.
And those grow better here. And one of the things that's really neat is, just like when I was 10 years old walking through the woods, and this recognition that these weeds and plants are out there and they're actual food that provide something for me. One of my goals, and one of the things I do with all that spare time I have, is taking groups of people out for nature walks, but really pointing out those edible medicinal plants that grow everywhere, along every sidewalk, in their backyard, and certainly in our parks and forests that are abundant here in Florida.
It's amazing. It is that reconnection with the world around us on such an intimate level, where we're 2 and 3 layers away from it. When we go to the grocery, even if we're going to the Saturday market, we're buying organics. They're already harvested. They're sitting there for us. They've been harvested by somebody else. We never see the process of growing. We don't get intimately involved in that. And so there's still a disconnect from the earth. And what I hear you talking about is giving people the opportunity to go and literally take what's living in one moment, put it in your mouth, and transform those living cells into something that now we get to use for our life, for the next whatever energy source, right? And that real direct connection, that, to me, I think that creates a real honoring of the plants and animals, if we consume animals, but a real honoring of the earth and its cycles, because we're so intimately connected with those.
Yeah, without a doubt. And the idea of reconnecting, about 2 years ago, I started to question, it's like, why am I giving up my weekends and my evenings and taking people for walks? I don't expect to create a 100,000 person tribe of wild foragers. I wish I could, and I hope it happens.
It's starting, Bob. We're growing it right here.
I know. But, so I started going, why am I doing this? And it was exactly that idea. If we as a society are disconnected from the earth and where our food comes from, and I was provided an opportunity to physically contact the earth and the nourishment that it gives us. And over the years, I've developed that idea and expounded on the idea. And you used the word insulate. And it's my favorite word when talking about this subject. We insulate ourselves from so many things. Right now, we're inside of a room in a studio, and we have insulation on the walls to keep certain sounds out, and I have shoes on that are rubber soled, and they insulate me from the ground. And we talk about the bioelectrical energy of the earth. Magnetism, whatever you want to call it, gravity is a type of energy. And in the realm of Chinese medicine, I talk about energy all day long. We call it qi. You can call it, from a Western construct, mitochondrial energy, the ATP cycle, call it what you will. There's so many different permutations of that. But the reality is we walk around all day long insulated from the earth. And whether it's concrete or carpeting or the rubber soles of our shoes, we are disconnected from the energy that exists. And not even going off into an esoteric idea of qi, but there is true energy in that. So when I take people out, one of the things I encourage them to do is actually take their shoes off.
Sure.
And it's I didn't know there was a thing called earthing.
I have heard of this, right?
And I
20 minutes a day, is that it, or something
I'm
like
good
that?
with 5 minutes.
5 minutes a day, and this is where you make direct skin to earth
Yeah.
contact,
Yes.
whether you're on the beach or just outside in your backyard or front yard or wherever.
Yes.
Just taking your shoes off and getting in touch with, allowing your skin to touch.
Exactly. And there's 40 minutes would be awesome. Most of us don't have 40 minutes to spare. And so I'm also a realist as well as this crazy herbalist guy. And so the idea of 5 minutes, go out, get your newspaper, don't put your shoes on, step off the driveway or the sidewalk and stand for 5 minutes. And I'll add to that the idea of face the sun with your eyes closed and feel the warmth of the sun. And when you opened this segment, you talked about things like the feeling of your cuff on your wrist. And we can feel temperature, we can feel the draft of the air conditioner, but if we're outside, we should feel the breeze and the warmth and hear the cicada calling.
And this is mindfulness, is what we're talking about.
It is.
And I teach mindfulness courses where people will come for 8 weeks, and
I'm giving away all your secrets in 5 minutes.
Learn how to sit there, but you don't need me to do it.
Yeah.
You might need a course or somebody like me to help you to break the patterns of thinking that are so ingrained in us that we come to believe and understand that the only world that exists is the one between our ears, and that's just not true. But doing exercises like what you're talking about, 5 minutes a day, just feeling your body on the earth and feeling the interaction of the elements on your skin and paying attention to your breath.
It'll change your world.
It will change your world. Yes, Bob, it will change your world.
It does. Here in Florida, some people may have noticed in the news that, we had a little bit of rain here the last few days.
Blah, blah, blah.
I'm very lucky. I must have been 2 inches higher since my garden's just happy. But, a lot of people stayed inside. And so this rain, although it's been really bad the last couple of days, it's really been going on for almost 2 weeks, if not a little bit longer.
Yeah.
We've had more rain and cloudiness I've seen more people for depression because they didn't go outside. They were frightened. They must all be made of sugar because they were going to melt. But they didn't go outside. They stayed inside. And it's laughable when we look at places like Seattle with the seasonal affective disorder that there's this gray overcast that people.
Oh, I lived in Portland for 7 years.
I'm so sorry, beautiful area, but seasonal affective disorder.
Oh, it's a real thing.
It is
suicide
very
rates
real.
really do skyrocket in the winter
Yes.
in that area.
And here in Florida, we don't see the sunshine for 3 days. We get the sad. Right?
Yes, we do.
And it's weird. So, even that, I was out gardening the last weekend. But in my practice, I would say 2/3 of my patients came in feeling more depressed than they had in years. And it was because they were inside and disconnected from their community, their environment, and the earth itself. And you could even look at the grander scheme. They didn't see and feel the sun.
Right. Nor did they feel the rain.
Yeah.
And what that is like on your skin, just walking around feeling the rain. It's one of those magical things that happens.
It is.
It really is. So being able to plug into that and say, well, this is okay. And it's so strange to me in some ways that it becomes so not okay.
Yeah.
It becomes so not okay to sweat, to get warm. And so I can't walk because I'm going to be all sweaty. I'm going to have perspiration. Well, that's okay. And it's kind of a nice way to cleanse out some things. If you go to a sauna, you're going to do it on purpose. But just even things like stepping outside and
Just
enjoying
for 5
the rain.
minutes.
Just enjoying the rain, right?
It was nice. I've studied a number of different traditions. Obviously, my practice is in Chinese medicine, but and it's my running joke. It's my herbalist man crush. The person I learned a lot of knowledge still from is David Winston, who's an herbalist up in the Northeast and also has a school, but he's at most of the same conferences that I go to. And he teaches, although he also practices Chinese herbal medicine, eclectic herbal medicine, but his foundation is in Cherokee medicine. He's part Cherokee and does a lot of ceremony within the Cherokee tradition. So one of the things he talks about a lot is the idea of going to water. And we were talking earlier before the show about things like ritual bathing. We've got a little class coming up that a friend of mine is teaching about ritual bathing. Yeah. And going to water is a very simple thing. And they look at rivers, they call it the long person. And because it is literally the lifeblood of the earth and all of nature and society. And so it was about every day, ideally twice a day, going out and standing in the water and allowing it to drip across your body in just the most simple fashion. That said, I also did ceremony with him where it was a just thawed river up in New Jersey that we did full immersion 7 times twice a day. That was traumatizing to me. That was the extreme of ritual bathing.
But you never forgot it.
No, not at all.
That was that you were fully alive in those moments.
Without a doubt.
So close to death.
I was very aware of my lifeblood, and it's stilling. But it's always fascinating. It's when we talk about these things in isolation sometimes in our community, and we talk about family, and we're usually just talking about our genetic family, but we talk about our friends and family. We talk about the earth, and these are all separate things. For so many of traditional cultures, these are all the same. And whether it's the sun, whether it's the earth, whether it's the water, the trees, they are our community and our family.
Father, son,
exactly.
Mother, moon,
and we
really means it.
Yes,
really,
exactly.
Really means.
And they're not just looking at some esoteric idea. That is our family.
Right.
Because without any one of those structures, we don't exist. And, when I tell people to go out, I say, stand on the earth with your bare feet and feel your mother. Feel the sun on your face, and that's your father. Between those two, the rain is actually, we say, is the sperm that is produced and falls to the earth and produces life. And so every one of the plants and the animals that grows from the earth and the sun, and they're intermixing, are our brothers and sisters and our cousins. And so if we reach out and we touch that plant, if we touch the earth, we are actually creating our community and reconnecting ourselves to our family that ultimately most of us have lost contact with. And so it's not our familial brother and sister with genetic heritage that we've lost touch with, which many of us have not reached out to talk to that immediate family. But further, out, we no longer connect to those. And so we lose respect, and we no longer take care of and nourish all of that environment that is truly our family and nourishes our very living.
Right, and that's so important. I think that recognizing the respect that comes from the connection of family.
Yes.
And so you wouldn't do what we do to the earth to your sister.
Yes.
You wouldn't consider that. You ask for what you need. You don't take it without asking or being reciprocal. You make sure that what you're taking, you give back in some way, and that you use what you take. And we are so disconnected from that we've created this really dangerous and intimately or possibly fatal
Yes.
relationship with our brothers and sisters, and the Mother Earth that sustains us.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
We're in a precarious position.
And it doesn't mean, obviously, we need to eat, and
Absolutely.
we harvest animals or plants or whatever, and we grow some. And I'll go back to, and again, when we look at traditional cultural ways, and everybody talks about Native American Indians, but we can go across the world.
Sure.
Every culture has very similar cultural constructs. And one is, yes, we harvest plants for food and medicine. And there was always about the mindfulness idea, and you would leave an offering.
Right.
And I remember one of David's class, and we were talking about that. And somebody's like, well, what if I don't have tobacco? And that's the classic thing that people offer.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like, couldn't I just leave $1? And I was like, what the hell is a plant going to do with $1? But
rather you would leave some spit.
yes, that would have more.
Right?
It needs
Leave
the water.
something of yourself.
But there's some research done recently because many traditions use a tobacco or similar powerful aromatic plant that was left as an offering of thanks.
Sure.
And we look at it, and if you've ever seen actual live tobacco plant, that is a powerful, the sticky resinous, the smell that comes off from the volatile oils is intense. Turns out it's an antifungal and an insect repellent. So if we were to break off a branch from a plant and expose, that's a cut on a plant, if we were to expose it to the elements, it might get an infection, fungus. Plant or animals or insects will come and attack and perhaps kill it. So if we provided it with this, these native people and their cute thing of leaving tobacco, they're actually nurturing the plant back to health, so it will continue to sustain them.
And
So
creating some medicine for that cut that they're
Yes,
creating in
exactly.
this ritual gift.
So they've created through traditional cultural ways a sustainable agricultural system that allows them to harvest food and medicine and yet protect the plants and the environment that they are intricately relying on for their continued life.
Right. So how are we nourishing this? How can we nourish this in ourselves? We've been talking about connecting with the earth. How about using herbs or using herbs as medicine? It's not, certainly our modern pharmaceuticals have derived from that, but in a much more potent form a lot of times. And we're impatient, so we want quick fixes. So tell me about the how we use herbs and how it's related to the Chinese connection, because that's something that you studied both of these.
Western and Chinese.
Yeah.
So it's funny, and I love to beat up and just keep talking about the cultural construct. When we look at traditional cultures, they all actually had a system of evaluating health and putting those herbs together in combination to treat illness. And Western medicine on a good day is maybe 100 years old. But the reality is the way it's practiced now is infant. We use blood work. What did they use before x-rays and blood work and all of this? They looked at the symptoms, and they saw the interrelationship of their symptoms with their environment, their food, their mental health. All of that was intricately combined. So what we find is traditional cultures look at illness and herbs and food actually as hot and cold, wet and dry, deficient and excess. Go across the world, every traditional culture thinks about that. And we all experience that. Watermelon in the summertime feels great. It's cooling, it's nourishing, and we all want to eat it. And, eating a piece of pickled ginger, is very warming. It's not spicy like cayenne pepper. It just warms our belly and our digestion. So when I look at herbs, it's not like, oh, everybody should take nettles. Everybody should do this. It's like each of us experience our life differently. Some of us are cold. Some of us are hot. Some are just wet and mucousy, and other people are dry and never can drink enough water. So pairing up those herbs energetically with the right person is where the magic is.
Okay, so this is where the Chinese method of diagnosis or observing is so helpful.
Yeah,
because they have a very developed way of doing that.
They wrote it down. Most traditional cultures, it was oral tradition. The Chinese, they kept the Westerners out until very recently, so they preserved their cultural heritage. Communism messed it up a little bit, but other than that, I can still read the textbooks from 2,000 and 3,000 years ago. And it's one of those things where it's like, for minor acute things, most people go down to CVS and buy a Tylenol or cough syrup. There's herbal medicine you can do like that too. Really easy stuff. You can do elderberry and chamomile. Those take care of things pretty simply.
So elderberry would be for coughs, or?
Yeah, for colds and flu. It's actually for upper respiratory infections. The berry or the flowers, phenomenal done as a tea. Combining it with yarrow and chamomile, powerful, helpful, and generally very safe. Most people are on really intense amounts of chemotherapy or something like that. It would be a very safe thing. It's even used on children in Europe.
I think that's one of the concerns that I know that I've had on occasion in wanting to use herbs and wondering about the interaction with this or that, or even learning about side effects. I'm so careful about reading about side effects of pharmaceuticals, wondering about side effects of herbals. How do you all address that?
Well, and I will say that I'm kind of fanatical about that. I actually teach a 2-hour course at least 3 times a year on herb-drug interactions, because I think it's so important, because there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings from both sides. In the mental health realm, obviously a lot of SSRIs, MAOIs, antidepressants, antipsychotics. And everybody's like, St. John's wort is for depression, and everybody wants to take St. John's wort instead of their bipolar medications. And that's not safe. It's also not safe to oftentimes take those two together. There are, without a doubt, herb interactions, there's drug interactions, there's food adverse reactions, all of those in there. Generally, when we're looking at raw herbs, there aren't a lot. There's a few biggies, and we can do another show on that if you want. Okay. But if you're on prescription medications, I would actually say go find an herbalist who can properly evaluate and use the herbs correctly. If you're just doing colds and flu kind of stuff, taking care of people who are generally healthy, you can do, and I hate to make fun of it, but kind of Reader's Digest herbal medicine. There's some very simple things that you can do.
Chamomile tea would help you sleep, or
sleep and digestion, bloating,
digestion's a calmative.
So many great, and the health food store is safe for that. But the more we isolate and concentrate herbs, so that it starts to look kind of pharmaceutical-like.
Sort of tinctures or that kind of thing?
And tinctures are probably pretty safe, but when you'll see a 20-to-1 extract of something, now you've 20 times increased your potential for both a good effect or an adverse effect. When we start looking at amino acid concentrates, there's a greater and greater increased risk when we get further and further away from what it looked like in nature. So I tell people all the time, if you pulled it up out of your yard, you know exactly what it is, you washed the poop off of it, and you ate it, probably not going to have an adverse reaction so long as it's not toxic. But in that same sense, if we isolate the active component out of it and concentrate it 100 times, I don't know what kind of crazy stuff's going to happen.
So now you're talking about potentiating it, and you're getting closer to a pharmaceutical.
It's drug-like, and it will have drug-like actions and adverse actions.
So people are generally safe eating plants.
There's so much
shoots and berries.
There's so much herbal medicine in a grocery store. In the produce section, it's ridiculous.
Really?
Celery, potassium-sparing diuretic. Celery root, even more powerful. Sage and thyme are great for sore throats and anti-infectives. Beets are great for potentiating your B vitamin and the methylation process in the body. So we can go down some pretty cool medical stuff. by eating your fruits and veggies.
Just by eating fruits and veggies.
Yeah,
Really?
and it's about pairing people up correctly with it, which is the nuance of all medicine, whether it's Western or Chinese.
What can somebody expect if they're coming to the acupuncture and herbal therapies? Let's say, dealing with a problem. I don't know. Let's say it was I don't know what UTI or something.
Yeah.
What would you?
And it's
what does an appointment look like?
it's very similar to going to a doctor, but there's a few different things about it. You're going to fill out a medical history the same way you would for any doctor's office. And here in Florida, as an acupuncture physician, we're actually primary care physicians, so we get to do all that crazy stuff like treat and diagnose.
Well, let me stop you right there. So you're a primary care physician. You're licensed by the state.
Yes.
Tell me again?
As an acupuncture physician.
As an acupuncture physician.
Yeah, so we get to use a fancy name like physician.
You can be a doctor.
Yeah.
You are a doctor.
But not an MD.
But not an MD.
Yeah.
You are a doctor.
Yes.
A doctor of acupuncture.
Yes.
Okay.
So
and licensed by the state.
Yes, by Department of Health. Got to do all the continuing ed stuff.
Same kind of stuff.
Board exams
and all that.
Case notes and all that fun stuff.
Okay.
And can bill insurance and do health evaluations.
Well, that's really important to understand.
Yeah, it's
to know that you're held accountable as well. It's not just some woo-woo stuff.
Right. We have to carry malpractice insurance, and it's funny. Our training.
That kind of validation is really important for our culture.
It is, and it's funny. Academically, I actually do more hours than most MDs. Clinically, they're catching babies and doing surgery. They're doing way more clinical. I only do 1,000 hours of clinical practice in school.
Okay.
So still, that's a lot.
Right. Yeah.
And we look at diet and everything from physical therapy to diet therapies to massage, herbal therapies. All that's part of the work we do. When somebody comes in, after we look at the health history, it's really funny. The average MD visit is 7 minutes, and it's like, what's your main complaint? Here's your meds. Have a nice day. For us, we have a luxury that the MDs don't. We have time. And so my normal intake is about an hour and a half that I actually spend with the patient. And that includes the acupuncture treatment, if we even do that. It may just be herbs and dietary recommendations. And so I get to ask all of those questions and the nuance of the questions. And UTI, there's 1,000 reasons why somebody might have a UTI. An MD might just throw some antibiotics, have a nice day. If it doesn't get better, come back. I'm going to look at their diet, whether they have new sexual partners, whether they've done an antibiotic that maybe it's a fungal kind of infection. Maybe it's interstitial cystitis and it's manifesting. This is their 14th one. So there's 1,000 different reasons that I have that luxury to explore. Stress can cause a UTI. Stress can cause poor eating that causes a UTI. And so I can look at recommending dietary changes, giving them herbs that are going to specifically help with the urinary tract infection. And so we're kind of nice in that we get to take that time with people, explain what we're doing, look at diet and lifestyle, provide care either through acupuncture, herbs, and so forth, and really make a more significant difference. And ultimately, we talked earlier about that mindfulness. I teach people to breathe. I know that's an important part of it. I prescribe that people go out and walk barefoot for 5 minutes. One of the most powerful, that and breath work are the two most powerful medicines that I have. Herbs come in after that. We really do have that luxury.
Get the system moving, get the system functioning, we get it oxygenated, and by golly, it can take care of a lot of what it needs to take care of.
Treatment and prevention.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the two things that I recommend for every client that I see in my mental health practice too, is exercise and meditation.
Yeah, goes a long way. And it's funny, like breath work, I can talk all this really interesting stuff of connecting the upper and lower dantian and, the Shen connecting to the kidney to Jern.
All right, I'm going to start oming here.
Yeah, right. But the reality, I always, when it talks about breath work and belly breathing, and you can go really fancy and hold a nostril and count, forget that. I want people's diaphragm to go up and down. And if you watch a kid before he goes to middle school, because we all get stressed out by the time we hit middle school, look at a little kid, their belly goes up and down with every single breath. It moves the lymphatics of 2/3 of our body, and that is the toxic waste. It is helping with the regulation of the acid-base balance in our blood. Everybody's like, oh, I got to eat more alkaline and all this stuff. Your bone matrix does the bulk of it. The oxygen-carbon dioxide exchange does the other half of it. Obviously, oxygen is necessary for energy, But then we look at the mental health, the quieting of the chatter. And so when we breathe with our shoulders, we every say, take a deep breath. And I can see you all out in radio land. Take a deep breath. All your shoulders went up to your ears. Right. All your energy went up to, we say, feed the monkey. And if you've ever seen a monkey at the zoo, they sling poo. They're little poo slingers. And that's what our internal dialogue does.
Right, we call it monkey mind.
Yes. And so
jumping from one thing to the next.
The Chinese talk about the horse mind. It's the one that resides below your belly button. And when we belly breathe, the shoulders don't go up. The belly goes out, the energy goes down. And so
start grounding.
The monkey starves. And not that I don't like monkeys, but they don't need to be up there slinging poo. Then the horse, all of a sudden, it gets nourished with our energy. So we can work on mental health, the detoxification through the lymphatic system, the balancing of the acid-base balance in our blood system, taking the strain off of our bones. All of that just because you breathe. So that's my most powerful medicine that I have.
Absolutely, and I'll add the vagal toning.
Oh, there you go.
So vagal toning is the connection with the vagal nerve, the vagus nerve that runs from your brain all the way down into your body. It's really the second nervous system, full of ganglia all over. And it's the center or the reactive part of the relaxation response. They're so used to hearing about the stress response, which is all about central nervous system and the amygdala firing off a reactive signal to danger, whether it's real or something we actually see, or whether the
perceived,
or what we're telling ourselves in our head.
The poo-slinging monkey.
The poo-slinging monkey, right? But the great thing about it is, as soon as you take a breath, Bob, and you know this so well, as soon as you take a belly breath, you're interrupting that part of the stress response, and you can't have both things going on at the same time.
Exactly.
So you start this feedback loop, which is the other feedback loop, which is the relaxation feedback loop. And I think that we have been so encultured to be in the stress response that we now think that's normal.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And that's why you have to go to a class sometimes to learn how to breathe and to stop the monkey mind and to make it a habit to get back to baseline, which is to be relaxed.
Yes, and unfortunately, it takes some practice.
It does practice
to have a coach.
It is practice.
I tell my my patients, I usually say it's like you're going to get really frustrated for 2 weeks trying to learn how to belly breathe, and all of a sudden you're going to get so frustrated you're going to quit and say screw this, and that's when it will happen. Because it is a natural way to breathe that we forgot, and we just need to
I go to
remind
schools
ourselves.
and I teach teachers how to belly breathe.
Yeah.
And it's so hard for people to do it. It
Very,
really is.
very challenging.
It
They're
is
trying to do it when you can't
It's
do it. It
very,
just
very
happens.
hard. Right.
Yeah, you have to let go.
Really essential though. Okay, I want to take what I call a poetry pause. So we're just going to take a couple of minutes, and this poem that I brought today is really, it's so related to what we've been talking about. One of my favorite poets is Mary Oliver. Now, I'm not religious necessarily, and but this poem is called Buddha's Last Instruction. Buddha's Last Instruction. So I'll try to do it some justice. Make yourself a light, said the Buddha before he died. I think of this every morning as the east begins to tear off its many clouds of darkness to send up the first signal, a white fan streaked with pink and violet, even green. An old man. He lay down between two solid trees, and he might have said anything knowing it was his final hour. The light burns upward. It thickens and settles over the fields. Around him, the villagers gathered and stretched forward to listen. Even before the sun itself hangs, disattached in the blue air, I am touched everywhere by its ocean of yellow waves. No doubt he thought of everything that had happened in his difficult life. And then I feel the sun itself as it blazes over the hills like a million flowers on fire. Clearly, I'm not needed. Yet I feel myself turning into something of inexplicable value. Slowly, beneath the branches, he raised his head. He looked into the faces of that frightened crowd. I love that poem and the juxtaposition of this great wise man whose final words are, "Make of yourself a light." And how the writer is waking up in the morning, witnessing the sunrise, witnessing the light, and then herself understanding that she is the light. She is manifested, as she says here, as it blazes over here, like a million flowers on fire. Clearly, I'm not needed, yet I feel myself turning into something of inexplicable value, as each of us are. Something of inexplicable value, something that we do when we make ourselves a light, when we are on this quest every day just to be who we are and to allow the sun to shine on us and warm us, allow the earth to feed us, allow the air and the breath to come into our bodies and go out of our bodies, asking nothing, receiving everything. We are given this gift of life. It costs us nothing. We don't have to do anything. We're only asked to be a light, to be who we are, to live into that authenticity. So I really love that poem and how she talks about just noticing the sunlight, every little kind of piece of that morning that comes across as she's thinking about this.
And I'll reference David Winston. I brought him down here a couple of years ago to speak to my school. And we took a walk out, and we had an extra day. We went out to Port DeSoto Park, and he hadn't really seen the ocean. He was from up north. So, our beaches are in Port DeSoto, a very special place down here, and it was unique. And we decided, I was like, so if you call a river the long person, what do you call the ocean? He was like, the fat person? I don't know. But it's funny, we're walking along, and I was getting my own little private herb walk in a way, and talking to the birds, and he was pointing things out, and I was seeing what he was talking about, and he had the most interesting statement that I'd never thought about before. He was like, "You see it, don't you?" I was like, "See what?" He's like, "You see the pattern." And he explained that, and I never thought about it because it just always been, that there is a pattern to nature. If you look at a forest, there is, and it seems like a cacophony of shapes and leaves and branches, but there isn't. There is a recognizable pattern if you kind of look at it through blurred eyes, if you will. And that when there's an anomaly, whether it's a car or an animal that maybe changes that pattern for a moment, if you see it, then you see the uniqueness of nature. And it's just like she explained, of experiencing and reveling in watching every moment and every tick as the sun grew and the heat. That was about experiencing and seeing the patterns of nature and in her own way of expressing it. And if we can take the time to try to recognize that, to be present, to be, that all of a sudden nature isn't something to conquer and control, but once again embrace and become collaborative with, and feel its interconnectedness to us and everything around it.
And to realize that we are nature. There is
Exactly.
no separation. I've been trying to figure out how to say this exactly. When we say we're going to reconnect with nature, well, we're
Reconnecting with yourself.
We're connecting with another part of ourselves.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And we have that reciprocal relationship with the earth.
Yes.
We get and we give, and we have a great responsibility that way. To be careful about what we're taking, about what we're getting, and also to pay attention to what are we giving, and how are we doing that, and that can get lost. And I think this is part of the revival of some of the ideas that you've been so well schooled in and what you're teaching, that are now hopefully coming to the forefront as we are part of this great turning that's caused by this great crisis And so it's a return to some of these ways of being, some of these ways of breathing, some of these ways of seeing, some of these ways of relating.
And that is the hope. You know, I made a joke about I don't expect to create 100,000 foragers, but I kind of hope in a way I do. Because if we're able to portray this, and through the myriad of different ways, not everybody has to go for an herb walk and eat, you know, nasty tasting plants.
Well, not nasty tasting.
Yeah, I know. I think they did
and
good.
Everybody can do that. Let's do that. Yeah.
But you know, there's different ways, and whether through its mindfulness that we do in the front lawn, or wandering around the woods, or going on a canoe trip, or something like that. There's so many different ways.
So what we eat.
Yes, and the way we eat, and we do that mindfully. And I know beforehand we were talking about ritual and things like that, and I know there's not enough time, but
It's been fast hour.
yeah, right. And everything from the way we bathe to the way we eat, to prepare our foods, to make our cup of coffee.
Right.
And if slowly we get people to do that, it's not that they have to change their political or religious beliefs or anything else, but create respect for the other humans that they interact with, but also all of those other things, as you said, that are nature, that are us, and that if we can change the way we view it and experience it, and if I teach a kid today, they're going to be an adult in 20 years. And that person will be making decisions, and those politicians will have to start to make the changes that are necessary, as are the corporate leaders and everything else. They can't destroy everything that they exist in, because they're part of nature too.
Right. It's an awakening that's happening.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping it's going to happen sooner
That's
rather than
right,
later. But we all have to, you know, accept the timing of things. But I think this timing is really good. Having the things that you're doing become more popular, be out there in the world, people realizing that they are efficacious, they do work, and they are a little bit gentler on both the human system, but also the whole system. That that can make a big change.
I know for medicine, you know, if I get hit by a truck, I'm going to the hospital. I want the best surgeon in town. I want all your drugs.
I want that guy to be a good mechanic.
But
because
exactly,
they're very, very good at that systemic.
But for chronic care, for systemic issues, and for preventative medicine, honestly, alternative medicine is a better choice. We are taught how to deal with those complex chronic conditions, whether it be an herbalist or an acupuncturist.
And maintaining the system.
Yeah,
Right.
we really do a much better job of that than Western medicine.
I think so.
They're not trained to maintain
They're not.
health or to take care of chronic conditions.
They're trained to find the illness and do
fight
something
it.
about it.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Bob, this has been really a fabulous hour.
Real
and,
pleasure.
My pleasure. Really terrific. Thank you so much for coming. Tell people how they can get a hold of you and
Sure.
Any programs that you have coming up.
You know, we're here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and our website is acuherbals.com, ACUHERBALS.com. Our phone number is 727-551-0857. If you email info@acuherbals.com, you will be getting me. And we've got Herb School coming up in November. It's almost full, so if you want to be a crazy clinical herbalist, come on down and
Herb
get
School.
Yeah, we got a 2-year clinical herb program.
2-year clinical herb program.
Yeah.
When you graduate with that, what do you get?
Swift kick in the butt and a lot of knowledge. There's no licensure for herbal medicine.
Okay.
So I think my students are some of the best trained herbalists out there, and are really prepared to have a professional clinical practice.
And they come and they observe you. I think you remember you telling me they have a sort of an internship that they do.
Yes, so we have 1 weekend a month for 2 years that we just do academics, and then every Wednesday from 6 to 10 p.m. we actually provide a very inexpensive herbal clinic, $10 for a consult, so they're seeing the general public